Oh, I'm sorry. There you are. There's another guy, Mcpherson.
We need to get rid of that other guy. That's all there is to it. Yes. How about yourself?
Guys, this is the Progressive Soapbox. Jamarl Thomas. I am here with a good friend of the show. I mean, Guy, you've been on the show, what, 5 or 6 times at this point? Scientist Guy Mcpherson, scientist and author Guy Mcpherson. And we're going to have somewhat of a free range, wide ranging talk about the things that went on in his career, especially discussing near term extinction and the pushback he got from that, and the defamation of character, and the attempted destruction of his reputation. And I think, honestly, a clear look at it does show that this doesn't look good. I mean, when you're looking at the biodiversity losses, when you're getting at the climate gains and increases, when you're even looking at the satellite footage, meaning getting more accurate measurements, it looks worse and worse. And it doesn't necessarily seem that there's going to be any abatement to it. And even if there was abatement to it, you still have this thing of a temperature rise, just based on the global dimming effect that would have been destroyed. So without further ado, Guy Mcpherson, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on. I think when we talked last time, I said you had me at hello. I think that was the way I put it. Welcome to the show, man. I really do appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Jamarl. I really appreciate the opportunity. Every time we talk, you expose flaws of mine in my thinking and point new ways, new directions that I can take. So, and you're open-minded and willing to speak your mind. So I really appreciate all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I don't know if I've exposed flaws yet, thank you, but I appreciate you saying so. We were talking before we came on, living with extinction. I love that topic, and I love the way that sounds. Especially after we're talking about the medical thing. And the eye thing is bad, losing partial vision, but it's the blunt, absolute totality of it all. Meaning, like, it happens all at once. There's no abating. There's no pleading your case. It's reality itself asserting itself all at once. And you're stuck with it. And being stuck with it, every time you look out and you see that, that black mark, it makes it that clear that at any point you could be snuffed out. Like, that could have taken your speech, that could have taken your ability to talk, reason, any of that stuff could have been gone. Even now, I often think, I'm like, all right, maybe, like, am I losing a step? Is there a blood vessel pop? Like, that type of stuff where it weirds you out, where you're living with this kind of sort of Damocles. That's pretty heady. Like, it's one thing to lose something and to know where it came from. So it's like when you're 17, you lose your kidneys. Fair enough, you get into your head and you find a new normal where you can just kind of get accustomed to it. You only have 2, so it's not like you can lose any more of those. So it's not this extra thing of losing. It's more so this understanding of, okay, loss happens, the world is not fair, you just got to deal with it. And when you do pretty well, like doing your job and that type of stuff and balancing things, and then something like that happens, it's a reminder that, that stuff can go up in smoke in a heartbeat. That's why I think it's interesting talking to you, because basically the extinction event is basically that on a world stage, where people have to reconcile themselves with their own mortality. And that's not necessarily easy to do. I don't even think, I would go so far as to say it might not even be possible to do. Maybe people can reconcile themselves with what that means. But I want to turn it over to you. How have you reconciled yourself with that? I mean, because this has been your point of view, and this has been the argument that you've made. And I would imagine for you to make that argument, you, to some degree, would have to reconcile yourself with this is all going to end at some point.
Right. And I love your perspective. Most people, at least most people I know, lose a relatively minor ability to sense something. Lose your sense of smell, lose your sense of taste, even temporarily, as many people did as a result of the ongoing pandemic. And you'd think that their entire life had ended, that they could no longer go on in the world with the way they are. And you have a significant condition with your eye, and you're just moving on. It could always be worse. I'm reminded of that scene in Young Frankenstein. It could be worse. It could be raining, and then it starts raining. And it could always be worse. I so much appreciate every single day since I have encountered the notion of abrupt climate change, since I have, and I was old when that happened, I was in my early 40s already. And so I had already experienced death of other people and come to grips with that. And so all of that together reminded me that we all die, including me, right? It's generally something we believe true about other people. Everybody's going to die, but not me. And so taking the time and going through some mental exercises to come to grips with your own death, particularly in the midst of a mass extinction event, particularly in the midst of a pandemic that is killing hundreds of thousands of people around the world, in the midst of abrupt, irreversible climate change. All of these things point to it's time to come to grips with the way we live, with how we live, with death in mind. Because death is always over that shoulder, trying to stalk you, trying to hunt you down. It can come at any moment. As Homer wrote in the Iliad some 2,800 years ago, any moment might be our last. And that's right, and it's been true for 2,800 years. It didn't happen within Homer's lifetime that any moment was till his last, until the one came. And we all have to face that. All of us are going to die. Life is unfair. A whole bunch of us are going to die a lot sooner than the chart says we're going to die. The life insurance actuary chart says that I'm going to die when I'm 86 or whatever. Well, no, I'm not. I just don't have that long left.
What's wild about this, it's many people within my family. Some people have been athletes. Some people have been, like physique-wise healthy, and etc. And many of those people have died. And sometimes it was just odd deaths. And people who see me now, if they knew me back then, they know there's a dramatic difference. Like I was very, very ill at many points. And those people are no longer here. I mean, Kobe Bryant, for God's sake. I mean, who would have bet that? Like, it's so fickle and so random. And like you said, everybody realizes they're going to croak and hit their head at some point. And to me, it's like, that's just the part of it. Like, you don't overthink it. Because if you overthink it, it screws with you a little bit. What does it mean? And that type of stuff. But it doesn't mean anything. I mean, and that's the catch. That's the other thing that you hit your head on. None of it means anything. Like when you think, I used to add so much value to chess, like a ton of value to it. Like this thing is so important. Or I used to add value to, I don't know, education, learning, and etc. And you realize it's like, well, but all that stuff goes up in smoke when you go up in smoke. And what does it matter? What does it matter at that point? Like right. It's an odd frame of reference to get your head in. When I was younger and kidney failure first started, I didn't do it because I didn't get into that reference. I think I was too young to think that way. I just kind of assumed, all right, you get a shot, everything will be okay, you will keep going. And then you realize, oh wait, that doesn't work that way. And you're like 25 years in. This was different for me. I experienced this as pure existentialism, like in a sense of like, all right, you are not going to be here at some point. That could end at any moment. You got to get your house in order. You got to make sure your wife is intact. You got to make sure your family's intact. And start thinking of structures and stuff to put in place. And my wife thinks it's so morbid, and I think it's the most practical thing in the world. It's a heady feeling. It's a weird thing to get your head around. Let me ask you this: do you think that's why there's a reaction to the argument of near-term extinction? Like, yes. And let's explain that to people for a moment, just so people know what we're talking about and have a little bit of context. When you say near-term extinction, now what do you mean? If people stop, let's say for the moment that we could magically stop all greenhouse gases from coming out today, would that save us?
Yeah, unfortunately, no, it wouldn't, because there's something known as the aerosol masking effect or global dimming, that if we stop producing, if we stop or even slow industrial activity, these aerosols that are keeping the planet from warming up very quickly, they fall out of the sky. Think of them as umbrellas over the earth, and we constantly are putting them up there with industrial activity, mostly from burning coal, and they're constantly falling out of the atmosphere, of course. And if we stop industrial activity, say we reach a global agreement that we're in really dire straits, so we have to stop producing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, so let's stop all industrial activity. If we did that, then we would run out of habitat very, very quickly, because the increase in temperature would be so abrupt that vertebrates and mammals and plants, and therefore us, could not keep up. So we're talking about a catch-22 here. We hear a lot about those greenhouse gases, especially these days, about carbon dioxide and methane. But even if we drop them down to zero, that's not the whole part of the story, because of this thing called global dimming, or the aerosol masking effect. So this tells me that there's no way out, that we have to maintain the process that is killing us and that is underlying a mass extinction event. Well, that's kind of a bummer, because it points to there being no way out. And that is, I think, the primary reason why I've come to be so disliked. I'll be measured in the use of that word. I've come to be disliked because I cite evidence indicating that there is no way to save ourselves as a species and as individuals. And so that tells me that we need to complete the relationships we're involved in now. We need to act with integrity. We need to take right action. And none of that makes a bit of difference in the end, because, as you already pointed out, we're all going to die. What you didn't point out is that every species goes extinct, including Homo sapiens. Of course we would go extinct. There have been more than a half a dozen species in the genus Homo that have gone extinct already. And I'll bet in the last years of those species, some people thought, we're going to get out of this. Of course we're going to get out of it, because we're just clever. We're smart that way. So it's a bummer. I point to the evidence. People don't like being reminded that they're going to die. I don't even like being reminded that I'm going to die. But I have come to grips with it because I've been pondering the idea for nearly 2 decades. And it's challenging to go through the process of admitting your own death and then reaching conclusions about how you're going to live your life in light of that conclusion. Because this is something you've known since, most people, since they were 10 or 12 years old, they knew they were going to die. But then how do you live with it? What relationships do you need to complete? What do you need to tell people in your family or in your group of friends that you haven't told them already? How comfortable are you with leaving somebody's life and that somebody is important to you? These are critically important questions that most of us do not ponder, because in the society we are discouraged from thinking about certain things like life and death and grief and grieving and the process of dying and all the bodily functions. You bring up bodily function at lunch sometime and see how popular that's going to make you. So there's this whole bucket of categories of things that we just don't allow ourselves to talk about. And I think that's what has landed us right here with the inability to have a conversation that is the most important one in the history of our lives.
Basically coming to terms with mortality. I mean,
yeah,
that's basically what it is.
And, people have been writing about this for literally thousands of years. And yet, in my experience, very few people are prepared.
Well, I mean, most people don't like talking about it. And most people get freaked out and weirded out by it. And I've been enamored by these type of conversations since I was a child. I mean, if I'm being honest. I don't think I fully accept, though, that there's no way out. I think the thing is, I lean more towards your side only because nobody seems to care that this is taking place. Like it's one of those, like, it's one thing if human ingenuity was put to the task. They said, all right, we're going to put a bunch of people in a room and we're going to figure this out. And it may not be Herculean. It may be these kind of small inch your way out of it steps. Like, yeah, you're laughing because You're laughing because you're thinking it's like, all right, yeah. Oh, that sad bloke hasn't accepted yet.
No, no. I'm
But
trying to figure out whether you haven't accepted your own death
well, no, I've
or
accepted my own
the
death.
extinction of our species.
I'm talking about extinction. Like I've
Okay.
accepted my own existence is going to come to an end at some point. I'm talking about finding no way out. I guess that's my issue. I don't know if there's. It may be like a finger trap, like a Chinese finger trap, where you have your hand in and you can't just pull your way out. It's a minor,
Right.
it may be some other effect. So that's the only reason why I don't take the maximalist position in that. But I accept your position. Like your position doesn't. It's weird from the standpoint of, yeah, he could be right, and all of this is going to come to pot. And part of the parcel to the reason I think you're right is only because nobody's doing anything. Like it's not like somebody might say, okay, we're going to get to the Paris Agreement, and you look at it and be like, what are you talking about? That's not it. Like that's not going to do it. People like when people can't reconcile a fundamental restructuring of the economy in a way to save life, and they couldn't reconcile it back then, and they damn sure can't reconcile it now. And Trump is basically making your argument and says, look, can't do anything about it now. Make some bucks.
Right. Well, you say Paris Agreement, most people at this point, it's so long ago, they don't even remember.
Right.
Right? We got this 12-second news cycle going.
Yeah, nothing is remembered. Yeah. Let me ask you this. So what conflict did you run into when you came out with this? Because as you've explained it to me, people, let's say, were jaded is an understatement, but definitely hostile and went after you just because of this research.
So here's the background. There's an NSA contracted spy who goes by the name of Mark Austin, and he's on Facebook. He's everywhere, and he claims to be a nephew of John McCain. And he'd been tracking me on campus, unknown to me, since 1996, when I was a mere 36 years old, and I didn't know anything. So he was following me around on campus, and he wrote to a host of one of my speaking tours on December 16th, 2016. So this goes back a while, nearly 4 years. And he writes, quote, "Thank you for hosting Guy Mcpherson. I'm afraid the NSA is about to get much tougher on him and a list of others, as Trump and Rex Tillerson have asked for specifics. Sorry, I'm only the messenger," end quote. I didn't think anything of it. I got this from a friend of mine who had been hosting me on tour, and I didn't think anything of it. Sure, whatever. I've received many death threats in my life, and I thought this was just another one of those big talk, no action kind of approaches. The organized defamation campaign that effectively removed me from public service was completed within 8 months after that message was sent.
Wait a minute. You said you have many death threats in your life. That's one bombshell. I don't know why you have many death threats in your life. But also the CIA part, I mean, that part is weird. I mean, so there was a specific interest and focus on you that you were alerted of.
Oh, yeah. And I didn't find out about this until I left active service at the university. And my leaving active service at the university was, I'm pretty sure, one of the objectives of this security surveillance state operation. Because my work on campus was not appreciated, we'll put it that way. I was pointing out the many downsides of the way we live, of this set of living arrangements, of industrial civilization.
Give me an example. What do you
It's
mean?
not just extinction of other species. It's a whole bunch of other ways that we're fouling the air and dirtying the water, and the list goes on. And so I wasn't particularly surprised when, after the fact, after I had left active service, I wasn't surprised to find out that my work was not appreciated and had drawn the attention of people at the highest level of government. That didn't surprise me at all, because I know how deeply embedded the surveillance security state in the United States goes. You don't have to work very hard to find a link between the federal government and, say, the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Right.
In fact, the first time I met CIA whistleblower Ray McGovern, I was on a speaking tour, and we were at this event, and less than 5 minutes after I met the man, I'm sitting with him, and I think there were 5 or 6 of us at the table all together, sharing a meal, and he said, I think most Americans know by now that the CIA was responsible for the death of John Kennedy. And I argued with him for a little bit because I didn't think almost anybody in the United States was willing to admit that.
Right.
And he just passed it off as if everybody knows this.
Like it's nothing.
Right, exactly. And so I said, one of my responses was, I don't think most people in the United States even know that the federal government was found guilty of assassinating Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
I don't think most people know that. And there was an FBI whistleblower sitting across from me at that table, and she said, really? So she didn't even know that there was a court case that found the federal government complicit in the assassination of Martin Luther King. How could she not know that? She's an FBI whistleblower. And so, of course, it makes perfect sense that most people are ignorant about most things because most people don't want to know about a lot of things. Most people don't even want to ponder their own lives, much less the extinction of our species. Certainly, most people don't want to admit that their daily actions are having absurdly terrible outcomes. Because if they admit that, then they might have to think about changing the way they live. And let's face it, in this country, we have pretty enormous privilege, and giving any of that up voluntarily is not something most people want to do, including me.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you ask people, for example, would you be willing to give up eating meat? It will, even if it was to save your own health. If they said, look, giving up eating meat will ensure that you don't die of a heart attack, I would wager a significant share, including myself, would have a difficult time doing it if possible. And that's just something satisfying your, taste buds. That doesn't go around to your ability to drive around in a car, to stop at a fast food restaurant, and the damage that's doing to the body of the person who's, giving you that for being paid horribly. Like, it's cascading. But it's even, like, for example, the little grandmother who wants to get her kid or her grandkid something to eat. And so she stops by McDonald's in her car and gets him this horrible food of an animal that was abused and tortured, and that was fashioned to a bun with a lot of it is, it's green slime or pink slime, whatever that stuff is. Right. She's giving this to her kid, and her kid is getting addicted to it at the formative ages where they develop their addictions of things they're going to use for the rest of their life at that very specific moment. Meaning, you can point to like 20 different items just in a small story about how average or just general activity creates harm. And I don't know how you stop that. And that's, again, like, the conversation is not even had in that sense. Like, we couldn't even get people to wear masks. Like, to put that in perspective, and do you know how aggravating that is? I'm in a hospital watching people scream about, this is too horrible, this is too onerous to wear these masks. And it's like, dude, like, wanting to slap somebody. Like, you have to accept that just in general that people, everybody have their different kind of things. But that was aggravating. Because it's like, just wear a mask. Like, you should care for your fellow human being enough where you don't want to give them something in the way that they don't want to give you something. And even that was too much. So it's like, how do you get a country? Sun chips. Do you remember these? The bag was really loud or something like that. And so in like Canada, whatever, they could use the new bag, and the bag was supposed to be like biodegradable or something to that effect. In the United States, they couldn't because it was too loud. And people was like, this bag is too loud. I can't deal with this. And so they had to go back to the old bag that wasn't the biodegradable bag.
Right. A bag.
Right. Right. So it's like, we can't even get that. So how do you, like, that's why I say I err towards your side on this, because we can't even get that. And if we can't even get that, it's like there's such the minor gains, the small gains. And that was
Right.
like even under an Obama administration, you weren't getting these kind of massive gains in climate change. He was god of oil. The amount of oil. He was bragging about the amount of oil that he flooded the market with. So,
Absolutely.
so I tend to, that's what I say, I err on your side on this stuff. I do see movements where people are trying to, like, a little here, a little there, but that seems too little too late. It seems that something needs to be a little bit more significant at this point.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why I think this is so important to talk about. This is not about me. And the whole defamation campaign, that's not about me. It's about withholding information from the populace. It's about withholding information that might guide people regarding how they live the rest of their lives. That's what I think is so tragic about this whole thing, is that in destroying the messenger, you are destroying the ability for the message to get out. And even if I'm wrong, the recommendations I make regarding how we live our lives still, I think, need to be heard. It's, for the most part, it's the same message John Lennon was promulgating about love, and Bob Marley. And we can go on with people who died way too young and who were promulgating this message about the way we live, being out of sync with the way most of us currently live. That's what I think is the tragic part.
Well, the thing is, though, I mean, we were born into an economic system that basically, for me to get my ends, I have to take it off of somebody else. And the moment that you have people born and dying in that particular system, that stuff gets ensconced in the way we even process the world. We're putting a value on, nature and all of these other things. I guess my point is, the moment that somebody has to go and work a 9 to 5, and they're working there at the discretion of somebody else who's telling them what to do, that person becomes a cog in a wheel. And you have people who are trying to get their own resources and trying to maximize their profit, and so they use the land as a resource. I guess I'm making the point, it's a mindset. It's a consciousness that kind of go in the way we operate, almost like a software in the way that we operate our lives. It's like you may not like this religion, but you're going to pray at this church when you go in and buying your Christmas gift, or you go in and buying your ham sandwich, or you go and buy. All of those things force people into commerce, whether you wanted to or not. Like, people don't get a choice in it. And so it becomes like it's a revolution of sorts that you're calling for.
We were born into captivity.
Yes, literally. I mean, and from a standpoint of what we could do as a society, but also from a standpoint of, like you said, this. Like, how do you get out of this? Like, I can't vote my way out of this. I can't.
Right.
People can't
Right.
even conceive of anything different outside of this. And so it's like,
Right.
when you come and you say, hey, the way we're living is destroying the world, well, people look at that and say, well, what do you mean? What other way of living is there? Like, it's a mind-blowing thing, and it's a revolutionary thing that you're telling people that, look, the world is coming to an end. You need to reconcile that. Let me ask you this, though. What does it matter if the world is coming to an end? Meaning, if the world is coming to an end, what does it matter to reconcile those items? I guess your point is, no, give people the ability to face reality. And
Yes.
they may basically take an action that they wouldn't necessarily take otherwise if they indeed was confronting reality in that way. I think that's your point.
Absolutely. And I think most of those actions are personal and intimate. So imagine that you have been given a terminal diagnosis. So, the medical community isn't always 100% on, so you're given 2 weeks to 2 months to live. And it's a 99% chance that you're out of here in 2 months. You deserve to know that, in part because you need to have conversations with people that you've so far not had. You need to call, that person you punched when you were in 5th grade, and they didn't do anything wrong. Maybe you need to apologize for that. There's dozens of different actions we might take if we were relatively certain that our death draws near. And that's why I think this is so important. Think about people in hospice, for example. People in hospice tell the truth pretty much all the time. And they are encouraged to do there's an entire infrastructure, emotional and physical setup so that people can have those conversations that they failed to have before, because this entire culture tells us don't have that conversation. Don't talk with anybody about your death, because you don't know when that's going to happen. It's probably a long time from now. Well, what happens when you get to be 82 years old? What happens when you get to be 95 years old? You know the end is drawing near. Maybe it's time to start having those conversations. And so that's what I'm trying to point out here with my work, is that there's a very good probability that the end is drawing near, and how you live your personal life should reflect the evidence, should reflect that indication that you don't get to live forever, and neither does anybody else. That's all.
Let me ask you this. It's funny, that goes both ways. That could be people deciding to live their life where they just say screw it and go
absolutely
rob a bank, jumping off all of those things is part and parcel to it.
And in fact, I've been accused of horrible things for just that. But I'm not encouraging people to do any of those terrible things. I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything illegal.
Yeah, you're just
I'm just indicating that your life is short.
Let me ask you, so what happened to you? And how did people respond to you? You said that you were given this kind of heads up about Trump and Tillerson taking a special interest. What was the response? What went on after that?
Well, there was a woman in her 20s in Australia, Western Australia, who contacted, this is how it started. She contacted me and she said she would like to host a speaking tour. And I was living in Belize in Central America at the time, and communications were notably poor. And this was early 2017. And so I said, of course, let's make arrangements. Let's get other people in on the speaking tour so that it's not an expensive and time-consuming and fossil fuel-consuming flight that is just for one or two presentations. So I'm starting to work with her. The relationship became more sexual over time, intimate. Although we never met. It became more romantic and more sexual over time. I'm in an open relationship with my partner. And so then, somewhere along the line, after a couple of months of this activity, and I didn't even know this was possible, she created Facebook chat messages. So we were corresponding almost exclusively on Facebook. So she created these Facebook chat messages that she released to pretty much everybody in my life, one at a time. And they indicated that I was a terrible person, that I wanted to rape her and any other young woman who came along, and even girls. And so they released this information. She released this information. I've no doubt she had some assistance with this, because it all happened very quickly and involved a lot of people. So imagine you're my best friend at the time, and you get what looks like a screenshot of a Facebook message between me and this young woman, and you get it from her, and it indicates that I'm the worst person on the planet. And not only that, but that the relationship that you and I have is a lie, because it's based on some made-up version of myself that makes me appear to be more charismatic and likable than I actually am. So within a matter of a week or two, again, I'm living in Belize, so telecommunications infrastructure is terrible. Everybody I had any sort of professional relationship with had jumped on board the defamation campaign. So this included the co-authors of my recent books, people I had spoken with on panel discussions, and a whole host of other people, including my very recent ex-wife. So up till that point, we had a friendly relationship with each other. So now all of these people receive this information, which makes it look like I'm writing things that I'm not writing. And all of the things they think I'm writing point to me being the worst person on the planet.
And wow. And all of this happened after getting the heads up that the government was paying more attention. Like, meaning you believe
Right.
that this was an operation of sorts.
Absolutely. I can't imagine it could be anything other than a surveillance security state operation. I can't imagine that to be the case because it happened so quickly and involved so many people. In addition, it was even before this, it was 5 years before this, that I received information from this Mark Austin character, who I've subsequently met, by the way. And it seems to me like he is an operator for this security surveillance state. He has identification indicating that he works for the NSA. So I don't doubt that he's legitimate. I don't doubt that this is that this operation to remove me from public service went higher than one woman in her 20s. I can't imagine it could be any other way. And there's good reason for that. There's good reason to remove me from public service. Think about the people who benefit the most from this set of living arrangements. Now, you and I enjoy enormous privilege, me more than you, because of my age and my race. But there's a whole lot of people who enjoy quite a bit of privilege, and there's a relatively few people, we'll call them the 1%ers, although I don't really know what the number is. Those people enjoy a tremendous amount of privilege as a result of this set of living arrangements, which includes, for example, most of us working jobs, working the 9 to 5, and without us working the 9 to 5, those 1%ers wouldn't enjoy nearly as much privilege as they currently have.
Right.
Think about somebody like Jeff Bezos. You know, he makes a nickel off every package that gets delivered by Amazon, and those add up to a few billion nickels at this point.
Yeah.
He doesn't want this set of living arrangements to go away. I'm a threat. I'm telling people that not only is this set of living arrangements going to go away, but you're all going to die. How are you going to live in light of that? Are you going to go to work every day and that's all you do is work so that the likes of Jeff Bezos can have a lot of money? And you're making enough money to get by, and
but the answer
that's
is
great,
yes.
whatever.
But the answer is yes. And I guess the reason this question becomes interesting is because it's one of those things of, if you put an endpoint, what changes? It's that conversation. And is there a difference between working for Jeff Bezos now, with him getting a nickel off of everything, versus dying, let's say in a year or two, working for Jeff Bezos? Like, what's the difference in those things? If the individual could change something, when an individual will change themselves, like, you know what I mean? Like, why would you do it if you didn't have to do it?
I think a lot of those individuals would take actions like I did and start living instead of working for a living. I think a lot of those individuals would recognize that the time is short and they have enough money in the bank to last another 2 or 3, or let's be conservative and say 5 or 10 years. I think a lot of those people might just walk away at that point and say, hey, I'm going to live now. I'm going to spend my time with my family. I'm going to spend my time with the people I love instead of spending time with those jerks at the water cooler where I work. So it doesn't take a lot of people making that what seems like a relatively minor change to cause a lot of money to stop going through the system, a lot of it winding up at the top. So I think that if my message were to reach a very large percentage of the populace, then a lot of people would stop working overtime every week. I think a lot of people would stop taking seriously whether they have $1 million or 1.2 million in their bank account, and so on.
Yeah.
And all of that, as we all know at this point, anybody paying attention knows that how much money you and I make is relatively minor compared to the work we do and how much money that makes for other people. And it's not just money, it's privilege too.
Yeah, agreed. 1,000% agree on that point. Like, the scales are so. I think the thing is, though, what, half of the country was nearly in poverty? I think 42, before COVID hit, 42% of the country made only $18,000 a year. And this is not, children. These are adults who are taking care of families. Um, and, that's appalling. Like, honestly, like in our system, in our society like that, you basically have people on a hamster wheel that just continuously just paycheck to paycheck to paycheck. I think it was like 70, 80% people live paycheck to paycheck.
Right. And
Yes. So what has happened as a result of that? I mean, you were able to publish books and everything else, but I would imagine this damaged relationships, to put it mildly. I mean, um, yeah. So I'll let you explain it.
yeah,
What happened
it's
as a
not
result of this?
it's not just personal. It's not just the relationships that I've lost. Again, this is not about me. This is about society in a larger sense. And what has happened is the leading voice on speaking tours, on corporate media outlets, has vanished. So nobody hears about my work anymore. Nobody considers that, in fact, our species is going extinct. I, I rarely hear anybody anywhere say, yeah, there's a good chance our species will go extinct within the next 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 years. All I ever hear is we need to do these 7 things, which of course are impossible, and then we're going to avoid extinction.
Let me ask you this: why do you believe that? I mean, certainly these scientists can see that this issue seems intractable. And even in the UN reports that are being released, it comes across as they're recognizing this is a problem, but they're more hair on fire in regards to what they're saying. So, why? I mean, what are they missing that you got that they're not seeing? Or is it all just the con? Does that make sense?
It's what they're keeping. It's not what they're missing. They're keeping enormous privilege.
No. What I mean is, from the standpoint of the scientists that are looking at climate change, and they
Mhm.
keep saying, hey, we just need to keep it below 2 degrees, those guys, what are they missing that you were able to nail down? I mean, because this seems, let me just say it this way. The UN, when they put out their reports, those reports seem to become more and more hair on fire. And those reports, whether they're talking about biodiversity or whether they're talking about habitat loss, whatever they're talking about, it seems to get more hair on fire the more years as they go by. But they never got to the point of saying extinction. They wouldn't touch
Right.
that word. Now, they go around it, especially when they're talking about animals, but they don't do it for humans. Now, what I'm getting at is, what are they missing that you're seeing where you could say, look, this is going to come to an end. There's no way out. And they're looking at it and saying, no, there is a way out. We just need to keep it to 2 degrees or something.
I think there's a couple of things. Again, I think that a lot of these people know what I know, and they're way smarter than I am, so they're not going to say it. And that allows them to hang on to a certain amount of privilege. If they're missing something, it's the transdisciplinary education that I have been through and that most people have not. Most people are aware, most people in the United States anyway, are aware that the university system is highly fragmented, highly what we'll call siloed in the United States and Western Europe. So people from the economics department rarely talk to people in the mathematics department, who rarely talk to people in the physics department, and so on. So how do you put those things together? Well, I'm the only person I know who quotes both work by Tim Garrett, who has at least 4 peer-reviewed articles indicating that civilization is a heat engine no matter how it's powered. I quote Tim Garrett and that work, and I also quote and point out frequently the aerosol masking effect, that a decline in industrial activity causes the planet to heat up even faster. I know a lot of people who quote Tim Garrett and say we need to stop or slow down the heat engine known as civilization. I know a lot of other people who say we can't possibly reduce industrial activity, we have to geoengineer our way out of this. I don't see anybody talking about the two of those at the same time. Why? I don't know. Is it because the university system encourages fragmentation? I think that's part of it. I think there's likely a lot of reasons why people are not quoting all of the evidence that I am quoting, and that has to do with the way the university system is structured, by the lack of privilege that will result from quoting too much information. And there's probably a lot more as well that I don't understand. But, I spent 21 years on various college campuses, and I can assure you that it's among the most privileged opportunities one can experience in a lifetime within this civilization, within this culture. And so that alone provides incentive to not want to swim upstream, we'll say.
Yeah. I think I understand what you mean by that. Last question, or not even a question, more so a comment for you, or your comment. What would you like to say? Or what would you like to communicate to people? I mean, what we've been talking about in general, but when it comes down to the people who are going after you, the people who are attacking you, some of these people seem like they were close friends of yours, like you said. Have you talked to some of the people who went after you in this way? Or those relationships at that point were broken off? I guess what I'm asking is, have you had the opportunity to confront or to deal with the people who basically said, who attacked you, who went after you? And
I have tried in many cases via email or personal conversation, and none of those people will have anything to do with me. All of them have blocked me on all social media, have blocked my email messages from coming in, and won't take my phone calls. So I want to have conversations with these folks, and they're unwilling. And beyond that, I don't know what I can do. I'm working hard to convince these people that I'm not the horrible person they think I am, and more importantly, that they have the same responsibility I do in providing a conduit for information that is really important to everybody on Earth, everybody in this society, everybody in this country, and everybody beyond this country. We have an obligation to provide that information. If a medical doctor knows with great certainty that a person is going to die in a certain amount of time, and they withhold that information, it's called malpractice. They're not allowed to withhold that information. You can't lie, even by omission, to people. And neither can we.
Is there any way to... It's funny, we were watching Voyager yesterday, and there was a conversation with the doctor. The doctor is a robot. Well, it's not a robot, he's a hologram. But basically, it had flipped, and the doctor at that point was real, and the doctor had to try to figure out how to prove that he was a hologram. Now, if you flip it on his head, it's like, well, how do you prove X? And it was impossible for him to do so because, again, he was a digital device. Everything in his entire reality was manufactured. So this also was manufactured. I'm curious, is there any way to show that those were not you who sent those messages or who wrote those messages? Because that seemed to be the most straightforward way. I mean, like, at the end of the day, if somebody's copying messages and everything else, that's basically slandering to destroy your reputation in order to destroy your ability to get across your message in regards to the science of this. Was there any way to discern or to nail down that, no, here's the smoking gun, that these weren't mine?
Yes, there is. You go straight to the Facebook messages. They still exist. Facebook has them. So I hired an attorney and paid $70,000. And the attorney hired somebody who just went straight onto Facebook. I didn't even have to provide my login credentials. That's apparently how easy it is to get into Facebook and look at all those original chat messages, not the ones that were made up. And that attorney concluded that for another $100 and some thousand, I would have a case and I'd be able to go forward. But I didn't have that kind of money. I haven't worked for a dozen years for pay. I've worked for free for the last dozen years. So I was at this point where if I had a whole bunch more money, I could throw it at this case, and this attorney would find a bunch of information and be able to use it against those people and take them to court. It's been 3 years ago, and I'm stuck because I don't have the financial resources to move this thing forward. I put out a call for donations to help me move it forward, and that didn't amount to much, certainly not the $100 and some thousand that was necessary. So I think it would be relatively straightforward. I'm willing to let anybody see my Facebook chat messages to move forward from a legal perspective, but there's not a lot of traction because, again, there's trying to prove that I'm a decent person has become an uphill task at this point. So what's in it for an attorney? All these people who have defamed me, they don't have a lot of money. So
yeah,
what are you going to do? Go after somebody who makes $18,000 a year?
No. I get it. I mean, I do get it. So last question, or I would say your commentary. What would you try to get across to the masses if you could be on a megaphone and you could be in front of the White House and Trump says, okay, Mr. Professor Mcpherson, go for it. Tell the public. What would that statement be?
I would point out what has become known as the Mcpherson Paradox, named by an online supporter of mine, Bill Eddy. And the Mcpherson Paradox indicates that if we maintain the set of living arrangements through any means, and this is based on the work of Tim Garrett, already mentioned before, then we continue to heat the planet. How fast? Well, the peer-reviewed literature says as early as 2030, we're headed for the mid-Pliocene, which is way too rapid a change to way too high a temperature for humans or almost any other life on Earth to persist. Okay, so that's the one side, is we're overheating the planet. If we continue to overheat the planet, we are not going to make it till 2030. And that approach, by the way, relies upon the IPCC's representative concentration pathways, which ignore a bunch of self-reinforcing feedback loops and the aerosol masking effect. Okay, that's the one side. We're overheating the planet. The other side is if all known means to reduce the heating mean reducing industrial activity, and that will drive us to a loss of habitat even sooner. I know of one way out, and I'm working with a Harvard scientist who works at Harvard's Roland Institute. His name is Dr. Ye Tao, and he has come up with a brilliant approach called MEER, M-E-E-R, the MEER project, the MEER Reflection Project specifically. And that's the only viable approach, as nearly as I can tell. We need to implement that 2 years ago or at the latest next month. And I've been trying really hard to get people with money connected to Dr. Tao so he can get this project not just moved on to the research phase, but into the implementation stage. And so I'm begging and pleading with everybody I come into contact with who has connections to real money to connect with Ye Tao. Again, there's no advantage to me in doing this. There's no money for me. There's nothing except the continued habitat on Earth for Homo sapiens, including me. So I really am working hard to make that connection between Dr. Tao and anybody else who's willing to throw some money his way to get this project off the ground. That's, in my mind, this is the most important research and implementation project in the history of our species, and it's almost unknown. Almost nobody even knows about it.
You know, the wild part about that, like you said, one of the most, and the mirrors project, is this the project where they're putting mirrors in space in order to reflect back?
No, it actually involves bulbs painted with silver 10 microns thick on the inside. The bulbs protect the paint so that it doesn't wear away, and these are on Earth. We don't need to launch. It doesn't require a tremendous amount of money. I mean, from my perspective and yours, it's a tremendous amount of money. But from the perspective of Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, it's pocket change. So it's not an enormous amount of money to get this program implemented and start reflecting back the incoming sunlight. And that's why it's called mirrors. That's the use of the name there.
So
is
it's
because
basically
it's
push the
reflecting
heat
back.
away from the Earth itself.
Yes, exactly. And it doesn't involve anything going up into space. We can just put mirrors right here on the planet, and you can put them in where they're most likely to do the most good is in the ocean, because we have a lot more ocean than we do terrestrial surface on Earth. So thus the point of making them into these balls that float, and in fact can be set for two stable states, one floating, and then say a bunch of ships are coming by or a hurricane is headed that way. You don't want those to be destroyed. So there's another stable state that's 20 meters or so below the surface, and then they're protected until the hurricane passes or until the fleet of Navy ships goes by or whatever, and so they don't get all trashed. So
That sounds like a little optimism there.
I,
That sounds like
it's unbecoming of me, I know. But, I've been working with Dr. Tao for more than a year now, and he's just having great difficulty getting traction in terms of getting money to support a large project. He's got 15 students working for him voluntarily all this last summer to try to come up with more research and better means of implementing this process. And I haven't found very many things that I am optimistic about. This is one. And I've met Dr. Tao in person. He's a genuine, decent human being. There's nothing in this for him either, except his grandchildren. I don't think he has any kids now, so I'm projecting to the future. His grandchildren will be able to thank him for saving habitat for humans and other species on Earth. That's all that's in it for him. That's all that's in it for me.
Well, I'm going to end it on that. Guy, I really appreciate this. I always enjoy talking to you. I'm fascinated by the subject, not to mention your knowledge of it. Like I said, even you have a tinge of optimism there with this particular thing. I guess my thing is, in the same way that this gentleman is trying to find a way out, if we put the powers of humanity in regards to trying to find a solution or a pathway, I would say it's possible. Now, the catch becomes, that's a big if. That's a massive if. Because that's a consciousness change. And I don't think we've seen it. But I really do hope that, all things being equal, I would prefer the Earth to be here in a habitable way for us to live in it. So I'll leave it at that. Guy Mcpherson, author, scientist, thank you. I really do appreciate you coming on.
Thanks you, Jamarl. It's a pleasure as always.
Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to end this here. Like, share, and of course, subscribe.